Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. We want to try and make it a wee bit of light relief for you. John and his team have very kindly invited us along today, and the subject has changed a little bit as we've gone along, but I think the inherent message and the content is around sponsorship, which we felt so many of you that are interested and involved in the sports industry. I always say when you sat at events like this, if you can go away with one good idea or one thing new, then maybe it's been worthwhile. I've absolutely no doubt you're all sat here waiting just for lunch. You're not sat here for my little spiel. But these four talented individuals sat in front of me are far more inspiring than I am. And they've all got some words of wisdom. They're all actual specialists. And I use that term genuinely in terms of things that they get involved with in the sport. Some have made a short journey to be here today. Others, like my wonderful friend Georgie, has hopped on a plane from Germany to come and join us. So we really have tried to have a few people here today who got something to share from their own personal expertise. So sponsorship and fundraising is the pigeonhole if you want to listen to us and think about what the subject matter is that we're going to try and cover. I'm Adrian Stores. I'm not going to give you a big spiel about me. I'm a director of Acrobat FCSM. We're purely a fundraising and a sponsorship consultancy, so I'm not going to take part in the panel, I'm just going to act as the MC. But if anybody does have any queries, the good thing is that everybody has kindly agreed to stay here during lunch, post-lunch, so if something flickers a little bit of interest during this panel session, then by all means follow up with the relevant individuals direct straight after this. So as a starting point, apart from just telling you which part of the country or which country they've come from, I'll just let each individual person announce who they are, just to give you a scene-setting episode.
Hi everyone, Charlie Beach. I'm the founder of Front Row Support, which is an outsourced business development company that I started about 18 months ago. We work, well, there's not a lot we're not touching in a minute, but essentially an awful lot of it is in sport background, professional rugby, so I've got some decent contacts in sort of that area. The career is followed on from there.
I'm Dan Wilson, and I'm a partner at Dual Accounting Firm, and we're firm of financial advisors across 4 cities across the UK. And within our client base, there's a fair few sport clubs across football, rugby league, and various other sports, so we can quite open our own sporting world and the factors around that.
Hi, I'm Ming. I'm the marketing manager of Bladder Rovers Football Club, and I joined the club about 6-7 months ago, and before that I worked in the football industry for about 6 years, mainly in marketing and the media. And my area of football is mainly about digital marketing and sponsorship activation. It'd be very interesting to speak to some of you guys in those areas.
Hi everyone, I'm George, co-founder of NFT, which I founded also 18 months ago. We help sports clubs with fundraising and NFT memberships, doing it with NFTs. And my background is in digitalization, fan engagement, and also crypto and NFTs. That's why I started the company. I'm super excited to talk about fundraising with some use cases.
So I've worked in sports fundraising and sponsorship all my life, and it's an area where you never stop learning. We can't naturally go through everything that is a detailed presentation of the topics today, but I just want to touch base on a variety of things that are topical. Some of you in the audience might already be quite knowledgeable about them, some of you might have heard about it but want to know a little bit more. So let's try and scratch the surface on a few of these. So I think we're all humming and erring about the cost of living crisis at the moment. Obviously that affects residential properties and families all around the country. It has a knock-on effect to many of us within businesses. But I'm going to start off by focusing on something which is in the virtual world. Sports clubs as a whole, within the realms of their sponsorship packages and partnership packages, in recent years have been looking at things like cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFTs. My knowledge of it is limited, but we have one specialist on the panel today. I've looked at a variety of things, and what I've seen is that lots of people have got lots of views on this, but I think the more balanced view that I tend to be getting from the audiences that I liaise with is that don't necessarily throw out the baby with the bathwater. There still could be something within this, could be something within the realms of partnership, sponsorship. There could be something within the realms of getting better fan engagement in the sports organisation that you're involved with. When I've looked at some success stories recently, not surprisingly because it's pulling at the heartstrings, the one that's recently been done by the Ukrainian FA was 100% successful for obvious reasons. The one that Liverpool have done recently in terms of NFT launch, interestingly, 94% of the launch was not taken up, but they still generated 1.5 million, of which 1.4 million went to the charitable foundation at Liverpool Football Club. Now, this gentleman lives and breathes within this space of NFTs, and I just wanted just to share with you a few words about what they are, why they're proving popular, and what its perception is in terms of the role of NFTs within the marketplace of sponsorship in sport.
Thank you very much, Adrian. To take one step back, so what is NFT for those who might not be familiar? NFT is at its simplest form, piece of information that can help you prove the authenticity of a digital item. Why is that important? Because before, the digital item could be copied multiple times without knowing where the original is, right? But now, with NFTs, you could identify which one is the original, and that's where the value comes from. So nowadays, clubs can issue these digital trading cards, attach these NFTs, tokens, and sell it to their fans, so raise funds while doing so. And as Adrian mentioned, some clubs did it in a good way, with others with less success. And I want to quickly touch base why this happens, why some clubs are more successful than the others. So when clubs are issuing NFTs, there are a few things to consider. So first of all, it's utility. So people, especially in times of bear market where we're right now, they will not buy NFT simply because they're NFT. There must be some kind of utility that the club provides to the NFT holder. That could be discount on merchandise, that could be a meet and greet to the team, etc., etc. That's one thing. Another thing is the scarcity. So, for example, the Liverpool example, they issued 170,000 NFTs, right? And only 9,000 was sold. On the other hand, Manchester City, they issued a limited amount. I think last collection was less than 10, and they sold it out immediately. So it's all about how you position yourself and how you communicate with your fans. And last but not least, the price, right? So how you price it, what's the price, what's the utility, and the combination of this makes the campaign. And in that regard, football has been much more successful, and there are much more examples, but we also see now the rugby area coming up, and the first steps the rugby clubs are taking to issue NFTs to their fans and generate revenue out of this as a source of revenue, use it as a source of revenue, but also use it as a tool to engage their fans. So provide exclusive membership to their fans. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what our company does. We support clubs to set the strategy and dive into NFT market in the right way.
I personally, one of the clubs that I'm representing, actually in the sport of volleyball, is going to be working with Georgi in terms of the launch Q4 this year. And it's exciting, and just as he says, a lot of it is following what traditionally have been basics in terms of thinking through the marketing mix and the marketing strategy, and ultimately what is the added value you're providing to the person, particularly if it's a fan that would want them to put their hands in their pockets and get the money out to part with that for an NFT. Whilst we're on the subject of non-traditional funding, and that's one of the things we want to talk about, so starting with NFTs, I'm now going to hand you over to Charlie, because it's been around for quite a while, this company, but again, another source of looking at potential funding streams, funding in inverted commas, is you're aware of some of the activities that some of the clubs have been doing, both in football and rugby recently, with an organisation that you do a little bit of work with, I understand, Bartercard.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so as part of the sort of many companies and things that I'm involved with, I'm just taking over the Leeds franchise for Bartercard. Some of you may have seen them, whether it's clubs you're with, in about 12 different Premiership level, top level sports clubs, Rangers, trying to think what else there with. Well, Leeds Rhinos is the flagship one, obviously around where I am, it's part of the Leeds franchise, which is why we're there. Interesting enough, they're actually launching an NFT collection music party card as well, it's all tied in one or the other. As AD says, it's an old concept, 20 years it's been running this business, it's out in Australia mainly, it's where it started. It's been over here a number of years, it's got 55,000 members in it. COVID dealt it the blow that it dealt many other industries. People cut it off as sort of an unnecessary thing that's coming back in now. It basically allows you to trade off things that are your surplus. So as any other business, restaurants get surplus meals, get the tables booked out. Where sports are using it, obviously every sporting club has costs. So fundraising's one end of the spectrum, you make more money, you spend less, that's how you get more money in a club. If you can put some of your spends or your print, your kit, all these things, you can put that out through trade pounds rather than actual pounds, you're making a massive saving. Bartercard recognise this, they're putting together some really interesting sports sponsorship packages where essentially they will buy your surplus sponsorship inventory. And this is where things like NFTs come in, this is where things are very interesting. The two founders as such in this country, well, the founder in this country and his best mate as such, are currently playing football. Their two teams, essentially club teams, playing on top pitches and stadiums up and down the country as part of their sponsorship deals. Money can't buy sponsorship opportunities, but they can put some trade balance on. They'll give you a massive value in trade pounds, and then they'll give you an equivalent in cash. So you'll get into cash sponsorship, you're getting things out for sponsorship that aren't traditional inventory. And it means you can then spend your current trade inventory on stuff that you're, at the moment, using cash for. So you're saving money, and you're not costing you anything that you'd be selling to anyone else anyway. So your shirt sponsorship is still available to be bought in the cash economy. Anything that you might put it on, stadium side boards, programs, everything else, that all goes, it always has. But for something you weren't already selling, you're suddenly given something you can use to buy real things and cut the costs. So it's a really innovative idea, using the age-old concept of barter rather than cash. So it's interesting because as Aidan says, he and I both focus in front of quite a lot of things. There's a lot of innovation coming through at the minute. There's companies that are doing hologram messaging that allows you to put the player's face on a message directly to people in the stands. There's fundraising events that are unique lotteries to each club that's doing it. There's some really cool things coming through. Doesn't take away from the players, doesn't take away from the stuff that's always been there, that's always still there, but you've got this on top. So if someone's willing to put money on it, I think you can get it out for sponsorship, and it's just thinking outside that box sometimes. And lastly, for me, also I'm an ex-sportsman myself, and I think there's a real value to using your sports people on every single person. You're involved in different clubs, your players are ambassadors for your club. They are people that have got a vested interest in your club doing well. They know lots of people, use them, train them, enable them, incentivise them even. And suddenly you'll find sponsorship flying from places you've never seen before. So that's where I'm approaching it from, lots of different ideas and everything else. But the Bartercard one is the lead at the moment.
I think as I said right at the start, I just want to give you various little snippets in this panel thing. So maybe there's a topic that gets brought up that people want to follow up over lunch or later on with the guys. But that is interesting because we're looking at things that might be non-traditional routes in terms of partnership and sponsorship. Even the Bartercard, as Charlie says, has been around for a long time. It was many years ago when I was first approached by them in terms of Super League Rugby Club I work with. More recently, they've caught my attention because they are the main shirt sponsor on Oldham Athletic Football Club. Oldham Athletic Football Club is one that's an interesting topical one, right on the doorstep from here. It's actually sent in there in 2004, I think, with a gentleman called Neil Joy and a guy called Shaw Jarvis. We think we did one of the first MBA investment buy-ins by wresting the shares off a previous owner, but they've gone through troublesome times, as many of us in the audience will know. Hopefully to come to far better times with an announced new owner imminently. But Bartercard is the front of shirt sponsor there, but I'm going to pass on to a colleague on the panel now because What is interesting, and something we wanted just to touch base on again, is that even things like the ownership structure can impact upon sponsorship within an organisation. So actually Oldham Athletic, until recently, 2 weeks ago, the entirety of the sponsorship was put on hold. The strategy, the packages, they were all put on hold and signed them because there was so much negativity until the recent announcement's been made, which just puts a lot more light on the club. So I'm going to hand over to Dan, who will talk a little bit about Fit and Proper Person and potentially how that does impact upon sponsorship and sponsorship revenue.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, I think it's becoming more prevalent now. I think people want more bang for the buck. CSR is getting massive now for sponsorship and the ROI. And I think if you're associated with a club who are not community focused, annoying fans, if fans see you in front of a shirt and they're boycotting clubs, whatever it might be, people ain't going to sponsor them. I think we've seen that. We've seen that since we've seen it at Oldham. We've seen that at Bury, we've seen it at a lot of other clubs. And I think the EFL are still lacking in that area in terms of their fit and proper person test ownership. We've done some due diligence in the past on some potential takeovers, and be banking about it being fit for purpose. It's not. There's a lot of ways around you can get around a fit and proper test that's not really. Well, it's not fit and proper, I suppose, but like the name suggests, like it should be. And I think, as Adrian says, clubs will suffer from that down the line. There's so many examples of where something's not worked out, and the owners mainly are local based, so they don't understand the community and what's involved to kind of get people on side and local sponsors on side. I just can't imagine the commercial department's role at all for the last couple of years as an example, where trying to sell sponsorship to a stadium where fans are boycotting and protesting. It must be impossible as well to try to get that. So I think the ownership structure is massive for clubs. I'm a Stockport fan, so we've got a new owner a couple of years ago, and they've done things, I'll say, properly in terms of community-wise. They really engage local companies, local communities, and their commercial revenues has grown because of that. That's very good, its own links as well. But yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy really. Once you get that momentum going, get that community on side, it just kind of snowballs from there really. So yes, that's probably a part that owners don't necessarily think about, but how they react with the local community and the fans is massive for your commercial return.
So Georgi started off talking about NFTs, and again, NFT is a new subject as a whole. Another subject that anybody who's involved locally with, well not locally, anywhere, with sports organisations, be it clubs, be it federations as such, you're starting to see more and more adverts being put out for people to join clubs as employees who are marketing specialists who understand the metaverse, metasphere, really following on for NFTs is another looking at the virtual world, which is creating opportunities for sponsorship and partnership and revenue streams that can be fed into organisations. Certainly if you're talking about Manchester City, Manchester United, both of those have employed people recently who are metaverse specialists. And I just wanted to perhaps start off, I'll put Ming on the spot, by the way, but I'll ask him an easier question in a minute, because he doesn't know that I'm going to ask him this. But Ming first met him in Romania on stage. At the time he was working for Burnley Football Club. He is an incredible talent. He's been the face of Chinese football, so when Chinese football has covered any of the English Premier League matches, invariably his face would pop up on screen, and they'd be interviewing everybody right, left and centre. But he's also been seen now as a digital marketing specialist. So, Ming, two things if you don't mind. One is, can you tell me if there's anything happening at Blackburn on the metaverse, or if you have any views on the metaverse? And then secondly, for the benefit of our audience here, can you just share perhaps some of the new things that are being done on a digital platform in the digital world that you're aware of, that obviously impinge upon sponsorship that people could consider or pay more attention to in the future?
Right, thanks Adrian. It's been a while since we met last time in Romania. Right, the first question, what's happening at Blackburn about Metaverse? I can tell you there's a training session and a workshop about Metaverse at the moment, same time, same day at club for the board and senior management. Party I mixed up because I'm here. And now I'll probably leave the question to Georgia, who's the expert in this area. But what I've noticed over the last few years, the trend of digital marketing and digital sponsorship is especially over the last 3 years after COVID, is the market is getting more segmented, and clubs trying to explore more inventories, more ways in order to explore more sponsorship opportunities. Thus, making the measurement of the impact of sponsorship even more, I wouldn't say more difficult, but more sophisticated. Because traditionally, when a brand or partner approach a club and for sponsorship or vice versa, traditionally branding and awareness are main goals for the majority of sponsorship partnerships. But especially after COVID happened 2.5 years ago, and more marketing budgets, advertising budgets been cut. So there are more, I've noticed brands and partners try to see more indirect or direct impact of the partnership on their bottom line, on the sales, rather than just the top level of the marketing funnel. So, but the digitization of the marketing world is making it more tricky because we don't just use one channel or one platform to convert customers, to go through the whole customer journey. We use like jigsaws or mix different parts of the whole marketing communication with our fans, with customers. So I think from a club's perspective, we need to have a more holistic, more consistent way to measure the impacts of different channels, different platforms, and different markets, and to try to find the right way to place it in the whole whole customer journey. To find we all have a single goal. We need to create sales, generate revenue for the clubs and for the partners. But we need to find out how they impact the bottom line, rather than just giving partners some vanity metrics like the number of likes or number of followers and or engagement on social media channels. So in that sense, I would say Metaverse or NFT, when you think about partnership in that area, partly it's a new trend over the last couple of years, and the awareness level has increased a lot. But the key thing is the conversion. The next challenge is how to bridge the gap between awareness, interest, and conversion. And also you need to think where you can create value for the club in these areas. How you can add value to the whole customer journey, customer experience. I think that's a new challenge, an industry-wide challenge for both NFT industry and for the football or rugby industries. Yeah.
Ling knows is going better than I, and certainly how you can add value to that customer journey is critical, as is how you can generate more revenue. That's the reason that most of the clients we're talking to about Metaverse are generally looking at it as well. It's clearly there, it's there with a lot of clubs now, and people might choose to dismiss it and think, oh, it's not for us. But there's something in it, and when you're looking at your entire repertoire of your sponsorship options, it's sometimes worth having a look. I've got a club that I'm working with at the moment that will be launching a stadium within the Metaverse. Anybody who watched Wimbledon last week will see that Wimbledon use the Metaverse and virtual reality in terms of some of their online sales activities. As George was correctly alluded to earlier on, NFT is clearly here and is being done and done well by certain people. But Georgie, it's a natural one for you to follow on. Have you got any views or comments you'd like to make with regards to particularly sponsorship and the Metaverse and how they intertwine?
Thanks, everyone. One comment I would like to add, it's to keep in mind that this should be a long-term game, because we see a lot of clubs and also a lot of brands playing short-term games with Metaverse. That means you do marketing stuff and try to cash out. That could work in the short term, but I think in the long term, especially also in the direction of sponsorship, everything follows the fence, right? So wherever the eyeballs are, the sponsors need to be there because that's the more exposure. And we see now more and more people tend to go to Metaverse direction. Everything goes into that digitalization direction. And also clubs need to have very strong strategy okay, why we're going there, what are we doing there, what's our plan, how are we gonna bring value to the fans, and how it's gonna work in the long term. And once you have this in place, then it's much easier to talk with your fans, get feedback, and also provide value not only to sponsors and cash out, but also to play the long-term game and stay in the game for the long term.
So we're constantly talking about things like revenue, we're talking about things like fundraising, we're talking about return on investment, because that's what they are all within the realms of sponsorship. Another thing I wanted to move on to, again, in these snippets that we're sharing with you, is something which, within the accounting world, the financial world, I think I, like many people, traditionally thought of this next source of income, it's probably just for businesses that have got a scientific background. I probably need to have a few employees that have got a white lab coat and a big forehead. That's the marketplace that we're in. But actually, what I've learned from working with this talented organisation in this respect is I worked with a Super League rugby club at one point in time on a project basis, and they had some quite severe cash flow difficulties. And unbeknownst to me, we managed to creatively but accurately and legally writing some bids which now allowed some serious cash flow to come into the business at a time when it was very much needed. So as a non-traditional source of finance that potentially we can access in our sporting world, so I just want to introduce you to Dan, who will talk a little bit about R&D tax credit.
Yeah, so R&D, as you said, a few years ago was kind of dealt or seen as lab coats, trying to get a COVID cure or whatever it might be. But if you're doing something innovative, then there's ways you can kind of make a claim. In the sporting world, it can be more around sports science, training methods, nutrition. I think the days of first day back of training after the summer, and there's beasting players doing laps and laps and laps are probably long gone now. Or sorry, James Milne's still within the Liverpool version of that. So it's kind of developing training techniques that build players up gradually, so when the season starts, they're ready to go. But also, come March, April next year, they're still kind of fit and still being able to play. It can be around looking at training methods around how much gym time should we do, how much swimming time should we do, what should the player be eating before games, after games, and wrapping all that together, you can kind of do as Paige says, a research and development claim, and that involves a cost analysis and a technical written report. A couple of years ago, during COVID, HMRC were letting R&D claims fly through without any kind of checks. And a few people schools got on that bandwagon, so they are a lot stricter now. So they are checking claims that were submitted previously, but it's not to say that if you are doing something that is innovative, that is R&D, it's a bit different, you can't still make a claim. And how it kind of works is you'll apply costs to certain projects that you're doing. So the cost will normally be around physio time, strength and conditioning coaches time, you've got nutritionists there kind of time. If players are injured, sometimes claims for their time against it. So if you're trying new methods, if someone's got a hamstring injury, it normally takes 4 weeks. Can we try and get them back within 2 weeks or 3 weeks? What are we doing differently? What are we trying? It doesn't have to work. We can try it. And after 8 weeks, well, we'll try something different next time. We'll keep working, trying that way. It's not about getting people back on the pitch as soon as possible, really. And one of our clients got into this quite bigly. Quite largely, and they increased their play availability from 80% to 92%, so they saw some real gains from that. So great for them from a point of view, they get their star players back on the pitch sooner, but by applying some of the costs in the background that kind of facilitate that, they can get some tax credits on the back of that. And it works in line with your corporation tax returns, that's how you kind of get the money back. So clubs who are profitable, higher up the pyramid, will just get their tax bill reduced. Clubs lower down the pyramid who normally loss making, you can surrender it for a lower percentage, but you still get that cash back. So it's kind of free cash. The technical side is quite important. As I say, HMRC are a bit more strict on this kind of stuff now than they were a couple of years ago. But as long as you can kind of argue with a bit of technical narrative what you're doing around player recovery and that kind of stuff, can be claims to be made. Other areas, less profitable other areas around any stadium or training ground improvements. There could be some engineering challenges around building a new ground or a new stand or redevelopment on your current site. That can be an area around it. Also some of the software stuff around ticket systems, fan engagement, a bit more woolly around that. HMRC a lot more on the software side of stuff nowadays. But still some various aspects of sport in club, it can be angles that they can potentially play for. As I say, it's kind of free money in effect.
The common question to me when I'm out there on the road selling sponsorship, and I'll do it from the smallest of the small, the local schools to the biggest of the big, in terms of some big branded sports clubs around Europe, is they're saying, what tends to be your take, Adrian? Are people giving up money in this current day and age for sponsorship reasons? Is it strategic marketing? Do they want a commercial return? Is that the reasons? Or are they just doing it as a means to show that they're spending some money on corporate social responsibility? Social impact investment as such. And I think the reality is just about every proposal that I do and every contract that we sign with a sponsor, it has elements of both. So they want to get some marketing benefit out of it, but also they like to be seem to be doing some good, and they might tie some of that investment to something that is community orientated. So the next question is going to go to Charlie on the end, because in terms of partnership marketing, and in terms of drives to get sponsorship revenue in, I don't know many people who are more connected and are juggling more balls at any one point in time than Charlie Beach, but talk us through that partnership way and how it works and how you structure it to get maximum benefit for sponsors.
Cheers, Andrew. Well, it's an interesting one, because again, it's a very old concept, you know. We find you something, we get something in return. It's a very simple thing, but it's trying to get as wide a net there as possible. That's what I sort of alluded to at the end there, sort of saying you've got players. Your players are essentially your most valuable, marketable item. One of my particular interests, sort of touched onto a lot of things that was talking here, so George is saying about not going into it for the short term, but sort of something that's coming in. And the women's game was a massive thing that 10, 15 years ago. People were kind of shaking their heads at. Some clubs are always not for us. I was at RFU forum not too long ago being told some of the women's teams weren't allowed to use the same training pads or put the back training pictures and weren't given kit. It's now probably the biggest growth area in sports marketing. In many ways, they're far more marketable than we are. Let's face it, they look better than most of us. You've automatically doubled your inventory. Instead of just having one kit and one set of sponsors, you've got two sets of kit, two sets of sponsors, and the difference between those people doing those sponsorships. I'm looking at doing a bit of sponsorship over York City Knights, and was really interested in the traditional construction, traditional accountancy, still sponsoring the men's kids. But you've got sports nutrition, you've got non-alcoholic spirits, you've got people like that wanting to sponsor the women's kids, because just as Adrian says, that CSR approach is massive, and it's seen as a much more progressive area than traditional male sports. So there's a real opportunity there. Talking R&D tax claims, we've got a physio who's talking about the effect the menstrual cycle has on women's performance in sport. Now that's an R&D area, surely. If you know that certain players are going to be affected at certain times, and you've got a big game coming up, you can fix your selection around that. Those are the percentages that sports teams play. That's why they all wear the GPS, it's why they all measure how hard you can hit, if you can load for it, how many kilometres you can run. That's a massive thing. So there's all sorts of angles into it. The point is the people that are most invested in a club are players. The fans are amazing, the fans are brilliant, they're the people that put the money in, they're the people that do it. But your livelihood as a professional sports person is the sport. You need your club to do well. If you want bigger squads, if you want to survive a year's attrition after a time, I know football's not rugby, but pretend it's dangerous. Let's see. But you have to have big squads. You've got to look after each other. There's got to be more money in there to afford the big squads. And it's like, so who's the best investor? Who's going to go out there and speak about what you do to more people with more passion than the people who are actually on the field? Who's going to engage the people around that game more than the people actually on the field? Now you send one of those players into a room, and he knows that he's going to get a small percentage of any percentage that he finds. He's speaking to businesses, people are engaging with him, doors are open to him or her that aren't open to other people. I pick the phone up, throw in the fact that I used to play for London Wasps, and there's a large community of business people that open the door and start talking to me that wouldn't traditionally to anybody else. So now I'm having conversations. Now if I know that there's businesses that are supporting my club, and I can bring them back to my club, put them in front of my chair and be like, he's interested. that suddenly is a hell of a sponsorship. That's something people can get behind. And as I say, you double that by having a women's team that just as support have their own inventory, have that going on, there's disability leagues, people getting in behind things. You know, talking about the link in there, the metaverse is coming. You either get in front of it or you get crushed by it. It's that simple. Women's sports proven that way. Like, we're all women playing rugby, well, they're smashing it, they're bloody good at it. You know, it's a hell of a game to watch. You need to get in front of things, it's coming in, it's happening. So, get on it. Metaverse, NFTs, blockchain, all of it. Like, I don't understand it. That's why I people like this, you know, but it's gonna happen, so get on it. And I just say, like, the bigger your inventory, the more money you're gonna make. The more people out there talking about it, the more money you're gonna make. And if there's a way of using the same age-old concept of commission deals, partnership channels, affiliate marketing, whatever they want to call it, you get me that, you get a little bit something for yourself, the club gets the rest, everybody gets something. So just get the biggest net you can find, throw it over as many things as you can, get everyone excited about it, and I think it will stick.
With my impressive hearing, I can hear the old stomach starting to rumble. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is if you could all just give a concluding statement in terms of John set as a target of having the title being the changing face of sponsorship. So as a one final message from each and every one of you as to what you think is the thing to look out for on sponsorship that we should ignore at our peril, that would be very much appreciated as your next input. So I'll start with Ming, if that's okay.
Yeah, I should agree with what Charlie just said. Charlie just mentioned about women football, and that's a trend is actually unbundling the sponsorship packages between men and women's football, and men and women's teams. And also research shows the club will generate more revenue, sponsorship, partnership revenue from those unbundling. And those unbundling are simultaneous, not just about men's and women's teams, about different aspects. The club has different channels, different platforms, especially in the digital era, and because the market is getting more and more segmented, so there are lots more opportunities for clubs, for rights holders to market to the sponsorship market, and well, I think from club perspective, we need to have although there are many different opportunities, you still need to have an overall consistent way to measure the impact of your different properties or inventories or assets. The final word for the metaverse is the perception at London Rovers, and also I believe at many clubs about metaverse is it's not a question about yes or no, it's more about when and who we partner with. So I think that's a challenge for the next stage, and it's a bit like internet boom 20 years ago, and at this stage, and if you choose to be the early adopter, if you want to observe how the industry develops. So, but we believe it's a future of the I would say it's a future, but it's more about how you create more value, how you place metaverse or Web3 in your overall digital or overall commercial marketing strategy, and rather than if you adopt it or not.
My comment would be rather short, so I would say start with the fans. So start with the fans, keep in mind their experience and work backwards. And when you work backwards, then sponsorships, NFTs, metaverse will make sense, because at the end of the day, at the end of the funnel, there are fans who need to experience this whole thing. And there's no blueprint. We're still in a very early stage, and there's no silver bullet one works for all, because every team's fans are different, and every team's sponsorship will look different. So each team needs to put a lot of work in figuring out what kind of NFTs work, what's the scarcity, what's the price, how should you structure this. And it's okay to fail in the beginning, because we need to experiment. But I believe we need to start with the fans and then work work backwards, and then we'll figure out a long-term game that will work and make the sponsorships and raising the funds both successful and lucrative in the long term.
It's interesting to think about fans, because I think we've seen that power really come back to life the last 2 or 3 years. It feels like the Super League and that kind of stuff. So I think people are realising what importance fans play again. For me, I think the growth of NFT will be fascinating in the next couple of years. We saw Crawley Town get bought out by an NFT company a few weeks ago. So it's reaching the lower leagues now as well, in football clubs in the UK. So I'm interested to see how that kind of develops next couple of years. I think they're doing their third key coming by about the NFT, so they can get into that market themselves. So yeah, interested to see how that develops next couple of years.
So I'll come from the other end of it. I think the player engagement is going to be huge. I think when you look at what COVID did in terms of pushing everyone virtual, pushing everyone online, we all loved it, it makes a lot of sense, but people have crashed back into face-to-face. People want to see people that, coming to events like this is massive now. People really want to get back into it, and I think that access to the players is huge. I think that's before everything kicked off. There was this sort of gulf being drawn between the elite footballers. It was all right, there's the team, and same with rugby, same with every sport. The top end were kind of being lifted away from the traditional fan values, the traditional things that made the teams what people supported in the first place. Whereas when you look at the success of like some of the England football team, like Rashford, the thing for the kids, Rashford's football's not like Elmo, so. But you see the impact he had as an individual who went out there to his own channels and said, no, I believe in this, and the whole bloody country came over and listened to it. That's the future, because they've got that access through the metaverse, through everything's going on. They've got that, so you need to realise, the clubs need to realise that the individuals, the players are where a lot of the focus is. You get them saying the right things and happening in the right places, that's going to be huge.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do take advantage of these gentlemen over lunch or the early part of the afternoon, because it's only some snippets we're able to give in the short time frame that's available. I'd just like to say a big thank you on my part, and thank you to the panel, which is Charlie, Dan, Ming and Georgie. Thank you very much indeed.